Well, hello there, and welcome to another edition of Warbird Wednesday. My name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum, and I am here with Jason today. Greg is out on assignment, on an F-117 assignment that we will not mention right now because we're not ready for that program yet. But today I have Jason, who's my cameraman, and Jason actually got to pick out the headgear, and he actually picked out the drink. So we're going to see how well he has done learning from the great Greg. Jason today is my assiduous assistant. Now today we're going down a path of, this is the last thing we're going to talk about with all this topical stuff going on in the Ukraine-Russian war that's going on. Just a terrible thing over there. And the Russians continue to escalate, and they have escalated even further by deploying an air-launched ballistic missile, the Kh-47M2, the dagger, the Kinzhal, which I hope Russian pronunciation is right, we're going to talk about. That is called a hypersonic missile. A lot of topical stuff about it. We're going to dig into a little bit today, talk about what they are, what they mean by being deployed on the battlefield, the physics of them, and so to speak. But first, Jason has turned me into a festive Wookiee. Is that the best thing I can describe here? Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get this off camera. We toss it. Good catch by the Jason there. So his first test is passed. Now, the dagger is interesting in that it's gotten a lot of press. Now, the dagger is deployed with either a MiG-31 as the air-launched vehicle or a Tupolev, a Tu-M3, which is a strategic bomber. But hypersonic speeds are not new. And it's interesting. A lot of people reporting on this are like, oh my goodness, this is something totally new. The reality is it is not new at all. So I'm going to use an X-15 today because this is how far back hypersonic speeds go. And then we're going to talk a little bit about this technology. But this is basically the term, you've heard the term old dog, new trick. This is an old dog with some new tricks. Incredibly dangerous piece of hardware, which I'm going to explain why. But the concept is not new. The concept goes all the way back to 1949 with what was called a bumper rocket at White Sands.
This camera, part of a flying laboratory, is recovered by Clyde Holliday of Johns Hopkins, who prepared it for its trip to the upper stratosphere. Rivaling the fantastic imagination of Jules Verne, the camera brought back a record of a flight into the heavens of a captured German V-2 rocket. At White Sands, New Mexico, the huge missile takes off. Air Force pictures show the rocket in flight, and the flying camera automatically takes over. The huge projectile drops the Earth behind at the tremendous speed of 4,000 feet per second. The rotation of the rocket causes the planet to spin before the lens, and the camera photographs the Earth 65 miles straight down. The horizon, 720 miles away, and the curvature of the Earth are astonishingly apparent in this still picture from the film. An observer in the rocket could have seen San Diego, Salt Lake City, Kansas City, and San Antonio. Approximately 1,600,000 square miles of the Earth's surface was revealed. The rocket reached the 65-mile height in 3 minutes. This giant engine of destruction, designed by Hitler to annihilate allied nations, now serves the worthy cause of peacetime research.
That vehicle, it was a two-stage rocket. Ironically, it was on a German V-2, which was the first stage, flew 5,150 miles an hour. That was in 1949. And we were experimenting with both hypersonic missiles and then hypersonic glide vehicles. And there is a big difference. We're going to talk about that and how they operate. So that bumper rocket was the first to get up to really high speeds up in the atmosphere on equipment that we know about, but it was just for the quest of speed. Now, there are two different types of these vehicles, as I mentioned. Glide vehicles which can either be re-entry, they can be re-entry vehicles, and powered vehicles. The powered vehicles can do one of two things. They can either carry a rocket engine like this X-15, or they can use a scramjet. Now, a scramjet can operate below 100,000 feet. Anything above 100,000 feet, and you're talking about a vehicle that has to have its own propellant on board or be propelled there by something else that had propellant. A lot of terms on propellant here, Jason. So the quest for speed, remember we've talked about the Century Series fighters just in conventional jets. We were taking the pilots and sticking them down lower and lower in the airplane and building big airplanes around them and going really fast in a straight line. That turned out, especially with the Century Series fighters, to not be a really good outcome. We went the other direction with Boyd, which was slowing the aircraft down and making them more maneuverable. But hypersonic aircraft and hypersonic technology had its place. The Yuri Gagarin in 1961 in April became the first human to travel at hypersonic speeds. In May of 1961, Alan Shepard became the second person. And in November, why I'm using the X-15, in November of 1961, Robert White flew the X-15 at Mach 6.7. So extremely fast. Now, what I said, the X-15 had internal rocket propellant and a rocket engine to get to that speed. Scramjets were continuing to be experimented with. Now, a scramjet, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, but a scramjet basically travels so fast it scoops up the air, remember, below 100,000 feet, and it compresses it in that engine enough to where it gets a detonation. Greg can actually throw up a graphic on how a scramjet operates. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that today, but scramjets in low altitude are nothing new. And when I say low altitude, below 100,000 feet. Now, the three areas on hypersonic aircraft I want you to look up, because we're going to give you some homework today, are the stagnation effect on a hypersonic vehicle, the high temperatures, because the F-15 definitely had a lot of high temperature issues, and then the other thing I want you to look up is a thing called the Knudsen flow. Look up the Knudsen factor and the Knudsen, and those three things I want you to look up and how they affect hypersonic vehicles. Now, what I want to do today with my salute is there were a lot of people that lost their lives, Jason, in pursuit of speed, all across the board, both in the American program and in the Russian or the Chinese programs. But there were many, many people that lost their lives in these vehicles, and they essentially just broke up. So we're going to start today with XXX. I could see where Jason is going here. He's learned from Greg. X-15, XXX. We're going to take the high road on this one, Jason, and figure out that's where you're going. But now these guys have got the marketing memo. Pure cane sugar since 1895, gluten-free and caffeine-free. So I'm excited about that. Let's see, 160 calories. I have no idea when it's bottled. Jason, it is cold, so you get something there. And there was a fizz. So it passed 2 of the tests of the botulism test. So to all those folks that flew these hypersonic vehicles or developed them or chased that dream, I want to salute you. That's actually pretty good. Customary second sip. I don't know. Jason, we may have to hire you to select the weapon of choice as far as the drinks. That was not bad. Awfully, a little sweet. So let's talk about modern applications. Well, when we look at modern battlefield development, the first thing is go back to the Gulf War, which was stealth. You cannot, you have radar evading technology, and stealth became very big because it was incredibly difficult to defend against. And you couple that with precision munitions, like where we're headed when we talk about the F-117, you have a very dangerous weapon system. Then we had advancements in robotics and drones, and we've had Predators. Those work really well, Reaper drones, remote drones, Global Hawk, a lot of other systems deployed by other countries. Those work really well where you own the airspace. And you can go in, and when you're dealing with like a tier 2 adversary where you own the airspace and basically you're delivering munitions on top of them, it's the best way I can describe it, you can deploy these robotic systems. Autonomous drones are here to stay, and they're going to become more and more sophisticated. Look up a program, another bit of homework. I'm going to give you one called Loyal Wingman. Look that one up as far as robotics, autonomous drones, and those types of things. Now, with these standard weapons, or these strategic weapons, and air-launched ballistic missiles, and they're very fast, what are we doing here? Well, we have developed, the United States has developed the Patriot, and a lot of other systems, the Israelis, Iron Dome. There are close-in support systems. The Navy, the Aegis systems, which is a combined a naval air protection unit that mates technology with missiles. We have become pretty good at air defense. In fact, we haven't become pretty good. We are really good at air defense. But when you bring something in that flies at Mach 10, let's say extremely fast. Now remember, we talked about that X-15 at Mach 6.7 in 1961. Now you bring in something that fast into the battlefield, and the other thing is that this vehicle can now maneuver at those speeds. So if you've got a missile, let's say you're hooked up to a MiG-31, which is a very fast airplane, takes you up to altitude, and then releases you. Now, being released at very high speed helps as well, right? Because you don't have to have as much fuel. It extends your range because it's a launch system. But as it comes into the target, when we're talking about Patriot or close-in air defense systems, guess what? They cannot react fast enough to deploy against these systems. Now, these systems were originally deployed by the Russians to go after, what were they deployed to go after, Jason? They were deployed to go after our aircraft carriers. They were originally anti-ship missiles. And we've talked before about if we ever actually did get into World War III, our adversaries, whether it was China or Russia, would immediately go after our carriers. They want to go after the carriers, deny us the use of the carriers. Probably all of our land-based ICBMs, any air bases that have the nuclear triad, right, which Air Force aircraft, and then probably as many of our sea-launched ballistic missiles in our submarines, they're going to go after that whole package. Well, if you have these missiles that are super, super fast and that you can't track with conventional radar, you've got a real problem. And that is where we are today. The United States has tested the AGM-183, which is a Mach 20 glide vehicle. Now let's talk about in-atmosphere scramjets, which still have an engine, and glide vehicles. The Chinese tested a glide vehicle at hypersonic speeds and freaked everybody out. In fact, the Secretary of Defense called it a Sputnik moment, which is we suddenly realized that, hey, we're pretty far behind the 8 ball in technology. They brought that in as a glide vehicle on an orbital trajectory, and there's a lot of questions about whether or not it worked very well. Whether it worked well or not, the Chinese and the Russians are developing these systems. Now, Putin and the Russian Air Force and the Russian Navy have been talking about these hypersonic systems since about 2017 or 2018. And the idea behind them is, as I said, They are first strike weapons. They are offensive weapons. ICBMs, any of those, the nuclear triad, typically are not first strike weapons. When we had, the Russians got very upset when we fielded missiles in Europe that were short range ballistic missiles, because they would not have a defense against those. Be very difficult for them to defend against those. Well, this is equally as dangerous. The dagger can be nuclear or conventional tipped, but make no mistake about it, this is not a defensive weapon. This is a first strike weapon, and this is an area where the United States really needs to sit down and do a lot of work and catch up, because what ends up happening here is these weapons, deterrence, mutual deterrence. If both sides has the same equipment, there's some deterrent. If you're dealing with an adversary that has a hypersonic weapon that you can deploy and, let's say, take out your airfields and strategic areas quickly, and you have zero defense, they're going to be much more tempted to attack you. And we're in a really dynamic situation with the war going on in Ukraine right now with Russia. They've already kind of rattled the nuclear saber. And that kind of takes me into, why did they deploy the dagger now? Well, I think there's two reasons. One, they've launched over 1,000 cruise missiles into Ukrainian airspace, both land-based and sea-based. I honestly think they're just running out of ammunition. I think they don't have a lot of these things. They're expensive. They take time to build. It's not like an artillery shell. These things have to be built up. They take technology to go in them. So I think the Russians may be depleting the amount of equipment that they have in their inventory, and they're falling back on this weapon. Now, that's twofold when they're falling back on this hypersonic weapon. One is to say to anybody that would think about intervening in Ukraine, hey, we could put nukes on these, and to the NATO countries, you're not that far away. We can have a nuke downtown in a very short period of time, and you have, unlike with Patriot batteries, and as I said, anti-missile systems that we have now, there's very little defense. So I think you combine the propaganda value with the fact that I think they're getting low on precision munitions. They don't have if there's any question about the Russian Air Force and the Russian tactics, we've kind of seen them now. And we've seen them in Georgia, we've seen them in Chechnya, we've seen them in Syria. They basically, as I've said before, they're a find, fix your enemy, and then just bombard the crap out of them. And that's what they're doing with the Ukrainians. What they're doing now is they probably do not have enough combat power in Ukraine to be able to take the actual Ukrainian cities, but they can do everything possible to break their will. That is probably why they have deployed the dagger. I would venture a guess that they don't have a bunch of them in inventory. From what I understand, there was one squadron of MiG-31s that was deployed to these in Western Russia, and that's where these are coming from. They may have some sea-launched versions, but my guess is that they don't have a ton of them in inventory, and you'll probably see them used in more of these kind of precision demonstration strikes where they're trying to rattle the cage. They're also trying to rattle the cage of the Ukrainians to basically say, fine, the United States may give you Su-300, and make no mistake about it, the VKS, the Russian Air Force, has not done well. They've lost, by any estimate, over 100 aircraft and multiple helicopters, lots of helicopters. They have not done well. So much so, the airspace over Ukraine is so dangerous that if you look at how they're deploying their aircraft with these standoff weapons, primarily in Russian airspace, because the Ukrainians don't have the reach to be able to go after them. But over the Ukraine, much to everybody, remember we talked about in a couple of videos back, them dispersing their air defense systems and giving the Russians a lot of decoys to shoot at. I think the Ukrainians played a very cagey game and have deployed a lot of their systems. So the fact that the Russian Air Force is not showing up over Ukraine in any great numbers, and that they're using these standoff precision weapons, tells me that they don't own the airspace. So let's hope that this war ends. But from a technology standpoint, this is a area where the United States needs to catch up. They are testing hypersonic weapons, but we do not have anything that we currently field. We need to get these things fielded as soon as possible because the dagger is an extremely dangerous weapon, and clearly the Russians are not afraid to use it. Now, if you want to, this X-15 came out of our model trove. Jason went in and got it, our model trove room. But if you want to own a X-15 of your very own, this is a 2,000 piece, 2,000, Jason, piece model set that you can click on the link. Jason will happily send it out to you. It is suitable for framing. It has got everything on here. I mean, it goes all the way back to the early 1900s, up to everything modern, including that X-15, which I always thought was a very, very cool aircraft. I've always liked the X-15. Now, we're in the European hangar today. We cannot do what we do, preserve these airplanes, do all the stuff with Warbird Wednesday without your generous donations. Click on that link, send us a few bucks. We can certainly use it. If you come across us on YouTube, go ahead and click on that subscribe button, like our YouTube videos. We keep doing Warbird Wednesday. We're going back to, we're done with Ukraine this week. We're going back to experimental aircraft as we get further into the F-117, which we're getting ready to open that exhibit. If you came across us on Facebook, like us on Facebook. My name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. Have a great day.